And now, before we sing the children out, there's one more beautiful thing. Gay talked about the tapestry that the lights created. And our volunteers here are about to create a new tapestry, a giant braid. You've met the Zanizer Renteria family, and we've also got David McTaggart and Eric Brown creating this braid. Think of the intertwining of your life with others. Think of intertwining your soul and your role into something that is more beautiful and more strong than any individual strand could possibly be. We've got an orange fringy thing, we've got a yellow rope, we've got a brass chain, we've got lavender, and we've got goldy shiny stuff. And all of it comes together into this giant braid. And in a minute, as we come near the end, they're going to leave the last several inches of the braid unbraided as a reminder of life's surprises. There's one right there. And the fact that, try as we will, nothing is ever quite finished. Okay, I don't think Roseanne can make it anymore. One more. All right. So we're going to leave that last end and hang this baby back up.
This week, there was a song stuck in my head that I just couldn't seem to get unstuck. It's called Morning in America by John Bellion. It begins, 1600 on the SATs, said they get in me an SUV. I've been trying to keep up with all of these great expectations, so I keep on faking. Though intended as a searing commentary on the state of affairs here in the US, it also profoundly reflects the struggles that we encounter every day as we try to do right by ourselves and also meet the expectations of others. As a rising senior, I think I've been meditating on that topic for the past year, as I've been stressing about my grades, test scores, and extracurriculars, all while trying to keep pace with my absurdly overachieving classmates. In a worship associates meeting earlier this year, I griped that my acquaintances and I have a lot of drive, but not a lot of purpose. I've seen friends of mine sit through a whole day of school, go to 3 club meetings, get on a bus, go to their regional tennis match, get home at 11:30, stagger through their homework until they collapse at 4 a.m., and then get up at 7 the next morning to begin the cycle all over again. The schedules that my classmates manage to pull off are truly Herculean, but when you ask them about why they're maintaining such crazy lifestyles, they don't talk about their love for tennis and inherent interest in each of their advanced classes. They talk about their fears of not getting into a good college, of not measuring up to their other classmates, and of not being good enough. When I began my sophomore year of high school, I thought that the hardest, bravest thing that I could do would be to dare to take on all the roles that others expected of me, and that by doing that, I would become successful, and then I would be happy. Needless to say, it was a very challenging year. I felt like I needed to wear every hat, and so I did. But at the end of it, looking back at my efforts, there were very few things that I was proud of. I had silenced that little voice inside of me that questioned my actions and efforts, and instead chosen what I realized was the easier route, to accept the goals and values that others set before me and act blindly in the name of them. In America, it seems that success is invariably the goal, and though it always seems to be lurking just behind the next Ivy League acceptance, promotion, or sports car, it's never something that we're going to be able to chase down. Though it seems that catching success is the hardest thing for us to do, I've found that what's even more difficult is detaching ourselves from the race. We're panic-stricken and distraught at the idea that we might get left behind or trampled underfoot, but when we have the courage to consider why we're running, we see much more clearly what's truly important to us. I used to think that the hardest, bravest thing that we could do was to live up to everyone's expectations, but now I know that what takes even more courage is to find the grace to accept the roles that are meaningful to us. This isn't to say that we should abandon our obligations to others, but rather that we should enter into a covenant with ourselves to make our actions meaningful. During several discussions I've had with Reverend Aaron, he's referenced a book by Parker Palmer entitled Let Your Life Speak. Though Let Your Life Speak bears many messages, I believe the most important one lies in the title itself. Letting your life speak is about making your life your message. It's not something you have to chase down, it's something that you have to grow. Allowing our lives to speak is the ultimate marriage of soul and role, and challenges us to live with intention. However, living with intention doesn't necessarily mean that we have to change what we're doing, just why we're doing it. Sam, a very good friend of mine, just started his freshman year at Brandeis on a sizable scholarship after graduating as a valedictorian and the recipient of an international baccalaureate diploma. I mention Sam because he sees every opportunity as a chance to interweave soul and role. Though following the same rigorous schedule as everyone else, Sam strove to make his every commitment and action contribute to his goal of becoming a professional musician and mathematician. If you walked into the doors of George Mason High School on an average day, I think you might think that you'd stumbled into a set of The Walking Dead. While it's true that my classmates and I don't get enough sleep, what makes us zombies is that we live without passion. But while all of us were on a quest for brains, Sam was on a journey to pursue what his heart led him to. I don't think that there was a day of school that passed that didn't begin with Sam bounding up to tell me all about the newest proof that he solved or obscure metal band that he discovered. And while it was annoying sometimes, he was so excited about all that he was doing that it made it worthwhile. He found success on his own terms. Even though, as John Bellion sings in Morning in America, the great expectations got us all imitating, the worst thing that we can do in trying to interweave soul and role is to not even try. Living with intention doesn't necessarily mean that we have to reconsider what we're doing, just why we're doing it. I hope that each of us can give ourselves the grace to live with passion and pursue endeavors that feed our souls. As Parker Palmer put it, before I can tell my life what I want to do with it, I must listen to my life telling me who I am.
Several years ago, I was in the ladies' room of a fancy office building. There was a worker there who was polishing the mirrors, cleaning the sinks, dealing with the trash, the whole bit, and singing. And as I left, I complimented her on her beautiful voice. She beamed at me and she exclaimed, "God is so good to me." She was in bathrooms and God. A couple of weeks ago, I was talking to a young auto mechanic as he gave me a ride home from the shop. And I learned that he had been working on cars for more than 10 years since he was a teenager, and he loved it. You know, he said, some days can be kind of tough. Some cars are really a lot harder than others. And I made some kind of sympathetic noise, and then he went on, but when you really love what you do, that frustration passes pretty fast. It turns back into a good day. Some of you may remember the book by Studs Terkel a number of years ago, Working. And in it, he interviews piles and piles of people, one of whom is a woman who works as a waitress. And she says, "I have to be a waitress. How else can I learn about people? When somebody says to me, 'You're great, how come you're just a waitress?' Just a waitress." And then she says, "But I don't feel lowly at all. I myself feel sure. I don't want to change this job. I love it." Jobs are a big part of most people's lives, or they have been a big part of our lives. Some say that doing the work you love, work that feeds your soul, is luxury, just a matter of privilege. Well, there's certainly an element of luxury here, we can't deny that. But from these stories, I have to conclude that it isn't exclusively about privilege. Some people evidently are able to entwine their soul and their role in their work, even if the work might not look like soul material. Soul material. Think of soul as something inherent in each of us, something that is deeply me. It's individual, it's particular, but it's more than just personality or feelings. The soul is intangible, of course, and it's invisible to others except perhaps in rare moments. The soul is the light within us. You might sometimes hear a person say, "Oh, so-and-so is an old soul." And what's usually meant by that is that a person seems somehow to have a deep well of compassion and wisdom, perhaps far beyond his or her words, her years. Sometimes we get a sense of someone's soul peeking through in what they do and what they say. You know, soul was a big deal for the early Universalists. They asserted that all souls were saved, that God wasn't picking and choosing. This assertion is the source of our belief in our first principle, the inherent worth and dignity of every human being. Early Universalists believed that God wasn't selecting you for how you acted, for what you did, but for who you were. It was a pretty radical concept. Nowadays, most of us as Unitarian Universalists do believe that it matters what we do and how we act. Probably not so much to gain God's favor as to co-create the world that we want to live in. This is our covenant with ourselves, a commitment to intertwine our soul, who we most deeply are, with our role, what we do in the world, a commitment to decide how to act, what to do, on the basis of who we are and what we value most deeply. So our roles go far beyond the work we do for a living. The author Thomas More delves into this topic in his book, Original Self. He observes, we can plant a tree in lieu of a forest and tend a yard that is our terra firma. We can make our home duties and avocation our primary labor and the effort of making a living secondary. Talk about a radical concept. I first encountered this concept 20 years ago in Julia Cameron's book, The Artist's Way. And that book was an early trail marker for me on the path that led me to UUCA. The subtitle is A Spiritual Path to Higher Creativity. And copies of it are available on the bookstand this morning. In fact, though, you can try out an exercise from The Artist's Way right now. There's space in your order of service for you to make a few notes. So take a minute to think about alternate careers or life paths that you might have chosen. Perhaps even a life path that you regret you didn't choose. Either way, jot down a couple of them. For example, 2 of mine were interpreter and pastry chef. So as you can see, it's okay to be a little bit wild. Take a minute to jot down a couple of those ideas, and we'll come back to them later. Okay, so we've got soul and role. And now for the intertwining. A few minutes ago, we saw our braiding volunteers as intertwining wildly disparate strands into one sturdy line. And here, look at this. This piece was created by an artist as she was about to get married a few years ago. And the different strands represent aspects of her life and her husband's, not just their practical selves, but also their spiritual and personal presence to each other. And this intertwining to this day represents their life together. By the way, this artist is going to be at Mistletoe Mall the first weekend of December, and she doesn't even live here. So the role is not just our job, it's about all of the things we do in our world. It's about how we behave in relation to the values and desires that light up our soul. Think about it. Perhaps one of your roles is that you're a parent or a grandparent, or perhaps you have decided never to be one, or maybe it just hasn't turned out that way. How does that role align with your soul? In what ways does it nurture you? In what ways does it challenge you? How often do you remind yourself, maybe in the midst of your tasks, of the deep values in your soul that relate to that role? Well, what about your volunteer positions, either here at church or someplace else? Do they satisfy you? Do they use your gifts? Do they support your values? If those roles connect with your soul, how does that connection affect your energy for what you need to do? What if you're a gay or lesbian or bisexual person who perhaps gathered up your courage at some point to act in accordance with your inner light, with your real soul's needs? I can say from personal experience that when I changed my role in the world to align with my lesbian soul, it had a huge and wonderful impact on integrating and strengthening my life. What if you're a trans person who realized either in a thunderclap or in some long, gentle drizzle that your sense of your soul, your truest, deepest self, did not match the anatomical gender of the body in which you were born? What does that do to the role that you play in your body, to your role in personal relationships? Imagine what happens when at some point you perhaps take deliberate action to align the two, when you change your name, maybe your body, the role that you play in the world, your whole visible identity among others. When you bring your soul and your role together into a strong and vibrant braid. And what about all of us as UUs? We say that our faith commits us to social equity and racial justice. We say that Black lives matter. Okay, so let's consider that belief as part of our souls. And what are we, you and I, doing? Last week at the Moral Revival at Pennsylvania Avenue Baptist Church, about 17 of us joined Reverend Linda to witness for equity and justice. In this congregation of more than 1,000 people, are our actions, our roles, bearing out what our guiding lights tell us is right? Or here's one more example. Some of you might be familiar with the work of Harvell. He's the author of Getting the Love You Want and a bunch of other books on intimate relationships. He talks about the imago, the image that we hold of our ideal partner, which of course our real partner never turns out quite to be. His point is that with conscious awareness, we can still ensure that our relationship is exactly the right relationship. Harvell, well, that's what we call him at our house, and we celebrated our 35th anniversary last week. Harvell says, romantic love is nature's way of seducing us down the path to our greatest wholeness. How is that? Well, romantic love is what first bonds us to our partner. After that, Harvell says, we need to extricate ourselves from the center of our own tiny universe. We must go through a spiritual rebirth when we open ourselves to our partner's pain and transcend the self-absorption that isolates us. To me, this means also that we need to recognize the pain in our own souls and not act on it. To be conscious of what makes us want to act out in certain ways and then choose not to play the role of the frustrated one, the silent one, the angry one, the whatever. We need to align our souls and our roles so that we can make sense of living our lives together. The same is true in our other relationships. We need to keep the light of our souls healthy and bright, and we need to learn how not to act out against each other, to be aware of our feelings and one another's, and then choose how we act, to live our values, to determine the role that we will play. Right now, in August of 2016, it seems to me that this challenge is playing out on our national stage as well. Here's Thomas Moore again. When the heart goes numb, as it does when a culture loses its soul, we can no longer feel empathy. We may feel cold and lonely in a world where deep hospitality has disappeared, and we may close our hearts to the needs of others because we have lost the capacity for empathy. And the habit of acting from fear sets in quickly and becomes steadily more rigid. Isn't that a big part of what we're seeing in our political discourse today? Doesn't it feel sometimes like our culture has lost its soul? Aren't we living in a period where those who feel cold and lonely are talking and even behaving on the basis of that fear? Well then, what is our role? As we turn away from that fear, what do we turn to? Where is empathy to be found? Our empathy needs to grow from our awakened heart, from our own confident knowledge of what our souls need, of who we are. Each one of us has a choice in how we act, if only we will take it. When we choose to act from our own awakened heart, then we are aligning our role with the light of our soul. We light candles nearly every week as we sing the hymn, Spirit of Life. And it's about precisely this, intertwining the soul and the role. It is a call for the grace to discover how. We sing, Spirit of Life, come unto me. Sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion. We sing it all the time, the stirrings of compassion. That's about the soul and its motivation for the role. Blow in the wind, rise in the sea, move in the hand, giving life the shape of justice. There's that business of role again, giving life the shape of justice. Through our hands, not through magic. Roots hold me close, wings set me free. Spirit of life, come to me, come to me. What a gift that we sing that hymn nearly every week, that we have this regular reminder about the intertwining. It is right here for all of us. All we need to do is to remain conscious, to stay awake, and choose how we behave. So this Labor Day weekend, let's remember that our role isn't just about our jobs. It's about all the venues in which we take action, all the ways in which we behave. And our soul can peek forth in all of them, if only we will let it. Let's make that our covenant with ourselves and with one another, to stay awake, to help one another stay awake, to behold the light of our soul, to remain open to the daily challenge of intertwining our soul and our role. Amen.